Greetings, loved ones. Today we continue our series on healing from childhood trauma with a teaching from Juanita Ryan and the National Association for Christian Recovery about the Judgmental Self. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Hit that like button and the notification bell, and please share these messages with others. You could save a life. In our last episode, we discussed the wounded self. And the second self is a judgmental self. Prior to recovery and early in recovery, this part of us is often in charge of things internally. And this part of us very much wants to remain in control. Many of us are surprised to discover as we begin a recovery how much this part of us has been in charge. The judgmental self is critical and rejecting of us and of others in many ways, but most especially, the judgmental part of ourself is rejecting our wounded self. The judgmental part of us may see the wounded child as too needy, too vulnerable, too much of a burden, too big of a problem, not deserving of our time, an embarrassment, and even a threat. To the judgmental part of us, the wounded child is to blame for the bad things that happen to us and is therefore a source of terrible shame. The judgmental self within us sees the wounded child as overwhelmed with pain. And the wounded child could lose control at any minute and misbehave, and therefore is bad and must be tightly controlled. Because of all this fear and reactivity toward the wounded self, the judgmental part of us wants to silence, control, and disown the wounded child. Judgment always creates separation. And in this case, because the judgment is against ourselves, the judge in us keeps us separated from ourselves. This separation is the opposite of wholeness, and it is the opposite of healing. When the judgmental part of ourselves is in charge, it actively impedes our healing. And the key to understanding this part of ourselves is that this part has been trying desperately to protect us from harm that we secretly fear we deserve. Depending on the nature of the trauma, this attempt to provide protection may have carried a feeling of life or death urgency. This could be true if we felt our world coming apart when parents divorced or when a parent died. And it could be true if neglect was physical as well as emotional, and it would certainly be true if our lives were directly threatened. The protective strategies that the judgmental part of us might use can range from being quiet and good to being angry and hostile. Whether the strategy of protection is to hide or to attack, the real drive behind it is to control ourselves and others in the hope that we can create some sense of safety. And this part of us has been working really hard to make life work. But its attempts inevitably make things worse. We will see that the solution to the difficulties created by the judgmental part of us is not to banish the wounded part of ourselves, but to heal the fear and the shame from which the judgmental part of us has been trying to protect. According to the CDC, over half of all children in the world, that is, and it blows my mind, 1 billion children ages 2 to 17 experience violence every year. The question is not if you will encounter a victim of violence. The question for God is, what will you do when you do encounter them? You could be the person who saves a life. Micah 6:8 says, He has showed you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. You are called. We are all called to be champions for justice. If you are caught in a situation of violence or have suffered trauma, I want you to know that there is a way out. It is not your fault. Abuse is not love. And most of all, I want you to know you are not alone. If you're suffering violence, reach out to someone today. If you find yourself in a dangerous situation, call 911 for help. If you know of a child or other person suffering violence, tell the authorities. In our next episode, we're going to continue this series on healing from childhood trauma and discuss the observing and compassionate self. Until then, God bless you.